Tyrique Stevenson might lose his starting cornerback job at Chicago Bears training camp, but not to any of the players we thought he would be battling.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On the show today, I want to take a deep dive into this Bears cornerback battle that maybe we didn't think would be super wide open to start training camp, but all of a sudden it might be the hottest battle on the roster, that or left tackle, I suppose, where a new challenger has emerged for Tyrique Stevenson's starting spot. Not Terrell Smith like we might have thought, or maybe even rookie Zay Frazier, but one of the unknowns who signed this offseason in free agency, Nahshon Wright from the Dallas Cowboys. So we'll take a look at how that cornerback battle looks. We'll get a little more information on who Nahshon Wright is and why he has a legitimate shot to win this battle. And then we'll check in on another cornerback change with Kyler Gordon having a new role in this defense and really becoming kind of a jack of all trades on the back end and what that might look like in Dennis Allen's defense. But the Bears defensive coordinator didn't mince words. He said that number 2 cornerback battle is wide open. And right now it's really looks like mostly a two-man battle between Tyrique Stevenson and Nahshon Wright. And I would think Stevenson is still the favorite and who I would bet money on being the starter, but Wright is not just some training camp dark horse. This is a legitimate battle and a legitimately open battle for that number 2 cornerback spot. Because when we came into training camp, we thought, okay, Stevenson's the incumbent, but we thought, last year he was kind of rotating with Terrell Smith, so that battle might pick back up here. And then, of course, they drafted Zay Frazier in the 5th round. He's got the length and some of the man coverage skills that, maybe he could sneak into that cornerback battle as a third in there, but as a rookie 5th round pick, probably not expecting Frazier to start. So it was really a matter of, can Stevenson hold off Terrell Smith once again? And we kind of thought, well, 2nd round pick in Stevenson, who's been a starter, he's going to get pushed a little bit, but probably going to be the guy who still starts. But then training camp starts, Jalen Johnson is injured or on the non-football injury list and not participating in training camp. And when the Bears come out there with their first team corners, of course, one of them is going to be Tyrique Stevenson still, but the one on the opposite side is a lesser-known cornerback by the name of Nahshon Wright. He's someone I don't think we spent any time talking about on this podcast because he was someone that wasn't really a known factor. He signed with the Bears kind of late in the process, and we'll talk a little bit more about his background and who he is. But this was a 1-year veteran minimum guy who had spent the previous season on the practice squad, so with a different team. So it wasn't like this big marquee name signing that we thought was going to emerge as some major threat to Tyrique Stevenson. But now, more than a week into training camp practices, it's been Wright and Stevenson as the 2 starters working with the first team. Dennis Allen says, hey, that's wide open, and he's getting more and more comfortable with the cornerback depth there. That includes Wright and Smith and Stevenson and a couple other guys. Worth noting that 5th round rookie Zay Frazier has been injured and has missed some training camp practice in here too. But here's how Dennis Allen talked about the improvement he's seeing in the cornerback room.
What's your comfort level with your depth at cornerback right now?
Better than it was in the spring. I've seen a lot of improvement from a lot of different guys. I think Nahshon Wright's improved. Guy that's really kind of stood out to me in the last few days, Nick McLeod. Here's a guy that, in the spring, I wasn't sure exactly what he was going to be, but he's come back in great shape. He understands the defense. He's doing all the things that Al's coaching him to do, which is allowing him to be successful. So I feel much better about that than I did in the spring. And yet, look, we still got some improvement to do.
So ultimately, this Stevenson versus Nahshon Wright battle, and Terrell Smith has gotten some first team reps in there too. So it's not purely a 2-man race, but this whole thing feels it has some similarities to the left tackle battle in the sense that there is an incumbent who's been a starter here for a few seasons, who we think is the favorite, Braxton Jones and Tyrique Stevenson. Like they both clearly begin in it being their job to lose, but they're being a legitimate challenger on the roster, in this case, Nahshon Wright, or at left tackle, Ozzie Trapillo, that you feel like that is truly an open battle and might be close to 50-50. But the newcomer still has to prove that he's better than the incumbent guy at that position. And then there's still like a third guy in both battles in Karana Magaji and Terrell Smith, who are still part of the battles, but it feels like they're not necessarily fully parts of the battle at this point. Like they're not out of it, but they're like a clear third place in that mix here. And so this will be interesting to follow as Jalen Johnson eventually gets healthy, and you feel like, okay, when he comes back, then you're going to have everyone rotating that spot opposite him, as opposed to right now, you can have both Stevenson and Wright playing out there with the first team offense, and it's a little bit harder to get a sense of like who might be, quote unquote, ahead of the other one, because you can have up and down days, but they're getting the same amount of reps, and there's not necessarily as visible of a depth chart there. But I do think, based on Nahshon Wright's history that we'll get into in a minute here, like he's not just some out of nowhere guy that is like, well, he can't possibly take over and start because he's just some nobody that's come out of this team. Like he does have a previous history here with one of the Bears coaches. He does have a little bit of a pedigree that we'll get into as well, and it makes him the legitimate challenger here, especially because he's just also playing well. Like he's also practicing well. He's got great size. He's a good fit for this defense, but so is Tyrique Stevenson. Like this feels like a scheme that Stevenson should be able to thrive in. And so I think if Stevenson just kind of continues on the trend he's been on this offseason and the general trajectory of his career, he should be able to win this battle over a guy who is a street free agent that you brought in late in the free agent process. But that being said, if Stevenson doesn't, they have a candidate that they really like, they really seem to like, right there to step in, and they also like the depth of someone like Terrell Smith, and they like the prospects of somebody like Zay Frazier continuing to develop and grow in that role. And we heard Dennis Allen mention Nick McLeod as another name that's in this mix, in this battle, in the competition right now, where it's like another free agent with some experience there. I think McLeod is probably behind the rest of these guys, but like maybe the next man up in that group. I mean, he's been a starter before for the New York Giants and spent last season with the San Francisco 49ers. So like he's been around the NFL a little bit before. There's all of a sudden a lot more experience in that cornerback room, plus Trey Flowers, who they signed at the start of training camp. So I think Dennis Allen can sit there and feel pretty good about they got some young guys with some upside in Frazier and Stevenson and Smith. They got some veterans who are hungry and trying to turn their careers around in Nahshon Wright and Nick McLeod and Trey Flowers, and that hopefully throughout this longer drawn out battle, some real winners and losers start to emerge there. But but Nahshon Wright is an interesting piece in all of this. But kind of dancing around it because I wanted to go more in depth and I want to go through his background as a relatively high draft pick, why he didn't have success early in his career, but why he could be in a position for more success with the Bears than he had on his previous teams. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at 5 Hour Energy. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. That's right, if you ever had a transfusion drink before, it brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of that favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. So whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Whether golf is your thing and you want to have good times with good people and good flavor, or anytime you're out and about and just need a little bit more of a boost, that's where 5 Hour Energy comes in. The grape, ginger, lime flavor gives you the best part of that clubhouse go-to without needing to chase down the beverage cart. So if you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use our promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders. So whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-hour energy shots today. So Nahshon Wright goes from unknown free agent signing to first team cornerback competing to start relatively quickly and relatively out of nowhere. And maybe this is more our fault for not paying very much attention to Nahshon Wright when he was signed in April. But at the same time, Nahshon Wright most recently spent last season on the practice squad of the Minnesota Vikings. And so generally, when you sign a free agent in April who had been on a team's practice squad the previous year, it's not necessarily the signing that gets a lot of attention. We're not going to dedicate a podcast to a cornerback who, not only a backup, but like not even good enough to make the Vikings 53-man roster last season after they traded for him from the Dallas Cowboys. Like this is the definition of a cast-off trying to save his career and turn things around here, because Nahshon Wright was a third-round pick by the Dallas Cowboys back in 2021. This was someone they had some amount of expectations to come in and be a player. He's a top 100 pick, 99th overall in that 2021 NFL draft out of Oregon State, and a lot to like. 6'4", 200 pounds, long, physical cornerback. As an aside, that's what we've talked about Dennis Allen liking to fit his scheme, so it makes sense that they go out and target a player like this. But of course, Jalen Johnson, Tyrique Stevenson, Terrell Smith, Zay Frazier, physical man-to-man cornerbacks as well. So it's not as though Nahshon Wright presents something that the Bears don't have in some of the other cornerbacks on the roster. But okay, so Cowboys draft him in the third round in 2021. It comes in as a backup. Not a lot of third-round corners come in and start. He plays some special teams and gets some bench action in a couple games. Week 18 of that season, he gets into the starting lineup. I think it was a little more of a throwaway game anyway, so okay, get the young corner some playing time in that game. But then they go into 2022, before his second season. In that NFL draft, they took cornerback Deron Bland in the 5th round, which normally a 5th-round cornerback pick isn't going to mean much for your defense. But for those who know anything about the Dallas Cowboys defense, Deron Bland came in as a 5th-round rookie in 2022 and had 5 interceptions that season. And then his second year in 2023, he led the NFL with 9 interceptions, including 5 pick sixes and 15 pass breakups. Like, Deron Bland was absolutely a massive steal for them in the 5th round that emerged really quickly and never really looked back. He was injured a bit this past season, but like his first 2 years, 22 and 23, he was a breakout star for the Dallas Cowboys. And so that didn't leave much opportunity for Nahshon Wright, because Bland stepped in and was great on the outside. They still had Diggs. They had drafted a couple years early. He's obviously emerging as a star cornerback for them at this time. And then they had, Jordan Lewis in the slot. But even, Nahshon Wright's at 6'4". He was never really going to be a slot guy. So it was just an outside player for them. So we kind of found that over the course of his second and third seasons in Dallas, at times he was the number 3 cornerback, where they'd have Bland and Diggs on the outside in their base defense, and then when they go to nickel, they would move Bland into the slot and then bring Wright in on the outside. So he got some playing time as a backup in year 2 and 3 and was technically a starter for a couple of games there. But year 3, entering 2023, injures his ankle in the preseason at training camp and starts the year on injured reserve. So, of course, now year 3 is off on literally the wrong foot. He's kind of a backup special teams player for the final 12 games of that season. And then entering the final year of his rookie contract last year, Cowboys traded him to the Vikings. It was a player-for-player swap for Andrew Booth. He's with the Vikings for the preseason. They cut him. They put him on the practice squad. And he spends all of 2024 on the Vikings practice squad. So he went from promising third-round pick to kind of buried on the Cowboys depth chart. And it sounds like from the Cowboys people I was talking to around Cowboys media, maybe turns out to not be a great scheme fit for what Dan Quinn was running there, that maybe the zone instincts never came along the way the Cowboys were hoping they would. They play a lot of cover 3 under Dan Quinn, and some of that has some man coverage aspects to it, but it just maybe was never the ideal fit. And now Chicago represents a much better fit for what they want Nahshon Wright to do. And so when you combine like, hey, this Dennis Allen scheme let him play more physical man coverage, which should be a better fit for him, and you brought with you the defensive backs coach from the Dallas Cowboys that drafted Nahshon Wright in Al Harris. So now all of a sudden you've got scheme fit and coach familiarity and perhaps some untapped potential as a third-round pick. And all of a sudden that you got kind of a formula here for a kind of surprise breakout candidate that it totally makes sense why he flew under the radar and why you wouldn't assume that all of a sudden everything was going to come together and he was going to put it together and look like the draft pick that maybe the Cowboys thought he would be 4 years ago. But at the same time, you can understand why the stars are aligning and that maybe a change of scenery, a change of coaching staff, a new defense, new system, but still have a defensive backs coach that believes in you. Like they wouldn't sign Nahshon Wright here if Al Harris didn't still believe in him and think there's maybe more that they can unlock from him that he just never had the opportunity to do in Dallas. And so it's kind of the perfect situation. Like if Nahshon Wright's not going to thrive right now in this, he's never going to thrive right now. So I think at the very least, he's making this 53-man roster. Like I still think, if you're trying to bet on is it going to be Stevenson or Wright, one of these guys has been a 2-year NFL starter. The other one's never been able to crack a starting lineup. Like Stevenson should still be the favorite just because he's also a good scheme fit in this defense. But as we can tell, like you're not going to just hand it to Stevenson. He's got to earn it, and he's getting pushed in a real way by Nahshon Wright. And so I'm really interested in watching how this battle continues to play out. I mean, I think right now, if I'm loosely trying to predict the Bears' 53-man roster at corner specifically, you're not going to cut Stevenson if he loses the battle, and you're probably not going to cut Nahshon Wright if you see him as kind of your best competition. So like it's Jalen Johnson, Tyrique Stevenson, Kyler Gordon, Nahshon Wright are your top 4 cornerbacks for sure. Josh Blackwell's probably your backup slot, so he's going to have a spot in the 53. And then Zay Frazier as a rookie 5th-round pick is probably somebody you want to keep as your 6th cornerback. So then does Terrell Smith get cut? Or do they cut Frazier and try and bring him back on the practice squad? Or we don't really know the extent of Zay Frazier's injury, but could you try and stash him on injured reserve because you want to keep Johnson, Stevenson, Gordon, Wright, Blackwell, and Smith? And then if you can get away with stashing Frazier on IR, like that's fine. He can kind of redshirt his rookie year anyway. Like, that's what's going to be interesting to me. And then you can never rule out a Nick McLeod or a Trey Flowers. But I do think the emergence of Nahshon Wright has put Terrell Smith's job in grave danger. Maybe Josh Blackwell as well, and maybe Zay Frazier as well, because it's those spots that Wright is absolutely representing. Maybe, and also you never know, like if things fall off with Wright, if they'd rather keep a younger player there, maybe they feel like, hey, we could get Nahshon Wright back on the practice squad. No one's going to claim, no one wanted him anyway, so we'd rather keep our young guys on the active roster that we think, hey, somebody might have wanted Zay Frazier in the draft. Somebody may have wanted Terrell Smith in the draft, and if we cut him, we're going to lose him. But Nahshon Wright was a street free agent until April 8th. Like there weren't a lot of people knocking down the doors to sign Nahshon Wright. So maybe they look at it and say, from a roster building standpoint, if he's not a starter, he might be easier to stash than some of the other players. So those will be some interesting 53-man roster dynamics to keep an eye on when we get a little bit closer to cut down day. Also going to be keeping an eye on how Kyler Gordon's role in the slot starts to morph and grow into a bunch of different things. And Dennis Allen did a good job of kind of explaining what that looks like as we've seen Gordon do more and more. So we'll take a look at how this works and what this might look like in the regular season with Kyler Gordon playing everywhere from outside cornerback to free safety next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever wish managing your money felt a little easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. I've got the Monarch Money app on my phone, and I really like it. I use it all the time because it's not just a budgeting app. It's like a complete financial command center. Because, before I've got an app for my bank accounts, I've got an app for my credit card, I've got an app for my retirement accounts, I've got an app for my other investments, and I got to sign into 4 different accounts and remember 4 different passwords to just kind of keep track of where things stand for me financially. But with the Monarch Money, you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's MONARCH, monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Kyler Gordon has the potential to be in a Tyrann Mathieu Honey Badger-like role for this Dennis Allen defense. Not so much it being the undersized safety who moves around, but being the his own version of do-it-all, jack of all trades, lines up anywhere on any given play, and you're not sure where he's going to be and what he's going to do on any given play. That makes it really difficult for opposing offenses to predict. And I think he's the kind of guy that we've seen have that skill set already, right? We've seen Kyler Gordon be really physical in the running game, fighting through blocks and getting tackles for loss. We've seen him be just a great physical tackler after the catch. He's a good player in coverage that can handle short, quick guys in zone or man-to-man, and he can also, body up more physical receivers as well, and then he's also a really effective blitzer off the edge. So it shouldn't be a surprise then that Dennis Allen sees that and says, hey, let's have some fun with this. Let's see how much we can do here and throw some different things at him and see what he can handle. And we've talked a little bit on this podcast before about Dennis Allen's defense and how one of the wrinkles he liked to go to a lot with the Saints was a dime package a lot of times where you'll have 6 defensive backs on the field, and then usually it was then 2 linebackers, 3 defensive linemen. So you're looking at definitely a lighter front, right? You're not doing this on first down or in short yardage situation, but when you get to second and long or third and long, where you're not so worried about is the team going to run the ball. You still got 5 big players plus one of these DBs will get in the box. Like, you can still put guys in the box. You're just going to be a little lower in the average weight in the box. You're not totally vulnerable to the run, because when you have 6 defensive backs on the field, that allows you to put more of those guys in the box or line them up in some different ways to challenge opposing defenses. Now, in New Orleans, the 6th player that came on the field was usually a third safety. They'd have their strong safety move up in the box and then go with 2 deep free safeties, or they might have another safety come off the bench and line somewhere in the box and kind of roam all over the defense. But for the Bears, the player who's really roaming is Kyler Gordon. And then they can bring in, Josh Blackwell as another slot cornerback to kind of be the 6th defensive back, because you don't really have another safety that you would feel super comfortable with putting in there. And I don't want Elijah Hicks getting that extra playing time. I don't want Jonathan Owens getting that extra playing time. So if you're bringing in anybody, it's probably another corner, and you can only have the 2 outside cornerbacks. There's only 2 sides to be outside. So anybody you bring in is either going to play a safety role or a slot role. So presumably that would be Josh Blackwell. I suppose they could dabble with moving Jalen Johnson into the slot in some of these packages and bringing in another outside guy, or I suppose maybe Stevenson could move inside. I mean, you don't necessarily want to take a good outside cornerback and put him inside, but there's different options, and that's the whole point for Dennis Allen, right? It's not just about how can we put Kyler Gordon in some funky positions, but also how can we utilize everyone's skill set to get the best defensive players on the field for that given situation. So here's how he explains what they're working through with Kyler Gordon and some of the thought process on kind of cross-training players across different positions.
Coach, you mixed in a good amount of dime here. What do you like about that personnel package and how it allows you to attack offense?
Yeah, I just think it gives us a little bit more versatility. Versatility from a coverage standpoint, what we want to do coverage-wise, just gives us a little bit more versatility. And yet, look, we're not married to any particular package. We're going to explore a lot of different things, a lot of different packages, and we're going to throw a lot of stuff up against the wall. We're going to see what sticks, and ultimately that's what we're going to do. Put our guys in the best position to be successful. And I think I said this the other day. Our job as coaches is to find the best 11 to give us the best opportunity to play successful defense, and whatever that package is. Is it 3 linebackers? Is it 2 linebackers? Is it 5 DBs, 6 DBs? And that could vary from week to week.
To be able to use Kyler in those situations, moving him around, free safety, outside corner. What do you appreciate about his game that allows you to do that?
Well, look, I think anytime you can have guys that have versatility that can play multiple positions, it gives us the flexibility to do a lot of different things. And look, when you go into a game and you got 48 guys dressed on game day or whatever the case may be, guys that can play multiple spots, you have an injury or two, and then now all of a sudden you got guys that can play multiple spots. It allows you to put your best 11 on the field. And so I think being able to cross-train players, is going to pay off and pay benefits for us, as we get into the season, because the season is a game of attrition. That's what the NFL is. I've said this before, that the NFL is a backup league, which means this. It means at some point your backup players are going to have to go in and play, and we're going to expect that they're going to be able to perform at a level that gives us an opportunity to be successful. So having guys that can play multiple positions just gives us flexibility in terms of how we deploy our personnel.
So it's pretty easy to visualize some of the different things Dennis Allen could do with Kyler Gordon being able to play all over the place, right? Whether that's, blitzing Jalen Johnson off the edge and then having Gordon kind of fill in his spot on the outside. You could bring Jaquan Brisker down in the box and let him play close to line of scrimmage on a play and have Kyler Gordon still be a deep safety, right? You could have two deep safeties, say in quotation marks, with Byard and Gordon deep, and then also be able to bring Brisker up close and he can play underneath in some situations. Or maybe you could go crazy and you could blitz both of your safeties, Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker, and have Kyler Gordon play a deep zone, and you could still have a single deep safety coverage with both of your safeties blitzing. Imagine the quarterback trying to read that, right? He sees both these safeties coming. There's going to be nobody deep back there then, because who else would be back there? There's no safeties, right? But here comes Kyler Gordon from out of sight, or just that you're not expecting, right? And there's so many different ways you can start to move guys around here and have some fun with it. And I imagine as training camp goes on, we'll get a better understanding of even other players that might cross-train across positions, like he said. I wonder if they could occasionally dabble with Jalen Johnson playing in the slot sometimes. Of course, you want Jalen Johnson on the other team's best wide receiver, but if that best wide receiver is lined up in the slot, then maybe you would want Jalen Johnson in the slot for that game even, or a certain set of plays in a game. And then Kyler Gordon could come in and play on the outside, or you could have Nahshon Wright come in and play on the outside, or Terrell Smith, and you could have Jalen and Gordon in the slot on a play in a dime coverage type look, right? There's just a lot of different ways that you can move these chess pieces around if they're prepared to play multiple different positions. And then as he talked about as well, with injuries, where I don't know, I think if you had an injury at safety, I would almost rather have Kyler Gordon playing safety than taking Elijah Hicks or Jonathan Owens off of the bench there. Or if you have an injury on the outside, say Jalen Johnson has something that pops up again, could you have Kyler Gordon and Tyrique Stevenson playing outside cornerback in base defense, and when you go into nickel, Gordon moves into the slot and then someone else comes and plays on the outside? You could take advantage of trying to just have your best players on the field, and that means leaving Gordon on as much as possible. I almost still feel like even if everyone's healthy, wouldn't you be better off with Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon as your outside cornerbacks in your base defense? And then when you go to the nickel, that's when you bring Stevenson or Nahshon Wright, whoever your other outside guy is, starts on the bench and is your number 3, and then Gordon moves into the slot. When you have 3 corners on the field, if you're trying to get your best 11 guys out there, Gordon, I think right now is a better player than either Stevenson or Wright. So why not play him more? I guess you don't want to overdo it with him, but at the same time, we expect Jalen Johnson to play every snap, so we could reasonably expect Kyler Gordon to also play every snap. So I think there's going to be a lot of fun things we see from this Bears secondary and different wrinkles that we don't even know about until they come out on the field in a regular season game as the year goes on. And you can be sure we'll break down all the different Dennis Allen defensive packages we see right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen today, be sure to check out our Locked On Bets podcast for all of your sports gambling advice. Gambling betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily baseball locks, plus can't miss football futures all the time. So go find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Coming back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears, more training camp updates, and another opportunity for you to bear down.